maybe felt a little stress in the last week? Anybody? Just a little. It might have been good stress. I mean, I've been traveling for the last 10 days. That's the best kind of stress, but it has a physiologic stress that comes with it, right? I love putting together events, but there's a logistical stress to that. So we all experience stress, good stress and bad stress. And what we're going to talk about today is understanding a little bit about what that does to us, what it does to our body, so that we can do a little self-diagnosis and decide maybe what we want to make some changes with. And the first research study that really looked into this question of what does stress do to our body came in the late 1990s, published in the early 2000s, and it was the Interheart study. It was huge, almost 25,000 people in a bunch of different countries around the world, and they asked every possible question you could imagine about psychosocial experiences and stressors and background. And at the end of the day, they crunched all this data, and the obvious things showed up, right, as meaningful stressors, you know, loss of a job, loss of a crop, loss of a spouse or a child, right, those obvious ones. But 4 factors showed up that were less well known, and I think they're super significant. Life will stressful events, of course. The next one that showed up is financial stress. And we're not talking about your socioeconomic status, you know, food scarcity, worrying where your children's next meal is coming from. This is dissatisfaction with your economic status, right? So it might be you have everything, but you're fighting over trusts, right? You're fighting over difficulty. People want things from you. You don't know how to manage your economics. There's a lot of versions of that stress. The next concept that shows up is called the locus of control, or your perception of control. And this has to do with how much control do you have over your day-to-day decisions. For example, do you have a very micromanagerial boss, or a controlling spouse, or just a schedule that is so overbooked that you have no time to make changes or take control of your own moments. And so that lack of a sense of control, a locus of control, is a measurable stressor, and it impacts our chronic disease health. The last one on this list is depression. We sometimes forget about that. You know, depression is under-recognized, under-acknowledged, we don't have enough compassion often for our own depression if somebody's going through it. But it is a physiologic stressor, and we can come at that from a lot of different ways. You know, brain balancing as well as more love and compassion, and things that make us happy. But depression is a physiologic stressor. And any one of these by themselves increases cardiovascular risk about 20%. 2 or more of these increase at 50%. So stress really has a big impact on our health, and our cardiovascular health is where it hits often. The other study that I want to reference is also very large. This is the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Events. Those of you who are psychologists know this well, and I know there's a number of you in the room here, in the garden. And this study was really the first to define, you know, how those early childhood experiences can pan out over our entire lives and become stressors that lead to adverse health effects. And the mechanisms through that are kind of interesting. You know, somebody has an adverse childhood event, and that's going to have an effect on disrupting the neurologic development of that child. And from that disruption, they might not have the cognitive development to develop normal emotional or behavioral skills or cognitive skills, and so they struggle in school. And that adds a layer of trauma on top of it. They might adopt maladaptive health behaviors because of that. This is where a lot of addiction comes from, and unhealthy behaviors. And that, of course, is going to feed forward into how much somebody can really participate in being a contributing member of their community, or whether they're not. So all of those steps kind of start from very early years. The good news is that it is absolutely healable and recoverable. It doesn't matter how terrible those experiences are. We have amazing people to help with PTSD and with the trauma of that, psychologists, body workers. There's a million great ways to work through that. The little science lesson here in Cellier's general adaptation theory. So this graph shows us what happens over time. Cellier came up with this theory quite a long time ago, in the 1920s or 30s, I think. And it was based on animal studies, of course. And what they found is, in terms of a stressor, for example, throwing the mouse in the pool, the stress hormones will come up. A healthy mouse will respond once that stressor is over and stress hormone levels come back to baseline. Now, what happens if we're in that stress situation for a long time? One of two things happens. Either we have prolonged levels of high cortisol and high stress hormones, and they stay high even after the event happens, or over enough time, we burn out and we head into this maladaptation phase. So if we're looking at the graph, first we overproduce over time, and then we drop off and can't produce over time. I'm going to walk you through two examples of people that I commonly work with, cases that are illustrative of these two different patterns. So see if you don't recognize something of yourself or something of a stressed out friend in these. So the first example is the story of sweet little Stacy. She came to me pretty young, at age 22, 21. Her mom brought her in because she was taking a semester off from college because she just really couldn't handle it. She had 60 pounds of weight gain in 8 months. She had rashes. She was very anxious and irritable, lots of insomnia, lots of skin issues. She'd been recently misdiagnosed with Lyme disease. She was a sick kid. And what was going on with her was adrenal hyperactivity. She was in that early stage of adrenal response. And when I tested her cortisol, that stress hormone, she came back way high, way above the normal lines here. She was overproducing. And so when she's overproducing like that, we need to do things to calm down that stress response. One of the main things we need to do with that is adopt a dietary pattern that's going to balance and calm that response. So remember what I just said is happening when we're in fight or flight? What goes up? Blood sugar, right? So we certainly don't want to add food-based things that are going to raise our blood sugar to that situation. It's tricky because the cravings and the sugar, you think that's going to help you feel better, but that is exactly what we're not looking for. So we really have to pay attention to balanced blood sugar when we have overactive adrenals. And we do that by paying attention to the glycemic index of food. Does anybody know that term? Good, most of you. I'll explain for those that did not nod. So the glycemic index measures how quickly a food that we consume turns into blood sugar in our blood. And we want that to happen pretty slowly. If it goes in very rapidly, for example, with candy or white bread or a super concentrated juice drink like carrot juice, right? Your blood sugar is going to go up very, very quickly. We need to release a bunch of insulin to get rid of that, and then it's going to come down very quickly. And the insulin is not very precise, so then we're stuck with a lot of insulin. That's what makes us tired. That gives you that carb coma feeling, and that's ultimately what's leading to insulin resistance and prediabetes and all of those negative things that we don't want to see. Some signs that your endocannabinoid system might be out of tone. A reliance on drugs to mask pain or inflammation, whether that's just NSAIDs or opioids or otherwise. Dreamless sleep, low amounts of REM sleep, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Being prone to anxiety or rumination or being in your head all the time. Motor issues, balance issues, neurologic issues, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, all of those types of things. Do you have difficulty accessing your creativity or your imagination? That's regulated by your endocannabinoid system. Do you have a history of brain injury? A concussion, stroke, head trauma, car accident? All of those are questions that you might wonder how your endocannabinoid tone is. So there's a lot of ways that we can increase our endocannabinoid. CBD is one of them. If you tried the truffles, those have a little bit of CBD in them. You will not get high, I promise. You'll feel good. You might notice those shoulder muscles are a little less tight. You might sleep really well tonight. Other things that enhance the endocannabinoid system: joyful, pleasant activity. Hanging out here, dancing, golfing, hiking, surfing, great things that stimulate our endocannabinoid system. The CBD and anything that binds to that system are fatty acids, right? So we need other fatty acids and we need good omega-3 fatty acid balance to respond well to CBD. So other good sources of omega-3s are going to be fish oil, flax, chia, all of those healthy oils, nuts, sardines, anchovies, eggs, pasture-fed or omega-3 enriched eggs. Socializing helps our endocannabinoid tone, so I hope you all partake in that today. Cocoa nibs do, 70% or more, so eat your chocolate. So all of those are great strategies for that. My personal favorite stress reduction strategy, which I feel like I can never quite get enough of, is time in nature. Getting outside, walking on the beach, listening to the birds, feeling the breeze. These are things that restore our stress response. This graph is from my colleague Andrew Beal. He does research on stress in nature. And in this research study, he subjected people to a standardized stressor, which is usually a test or public speaking. So they do that, and then they measure cortisol levels, and then he subjected people to a stress recovery time. And the people went into 3 different control groups. They were watching a video of traffic, they were watching a video of nature in a pedestrian mall kind of setting, or they actually went out the back door of the research lab and sat in nature around the trees. And you can see the difference in the stress responses here. Just sitting in nature made a huge difference, and pretty fast, like a 4-minute recovery, from the stressor, or 7 or 10 minutes. So it doesn't take long, and it's great if we could start our day with an hour walk on the beach. But if you only have 4 minutes, go outside and breathe. Just sit on the back step. Enjoy things a little bit. Stop at the park for just a few minutes as you're driving to your next destination. These things make a difference. And so I'll close with this concept from yoga philosophy that I think is it's what I try to follow in my life. This is the concept of sthukha and sthira. Has any yogis here heard those terms before? So it is the idea of effort and ease. So when you're holding a yoga pose, your warrior 2 or something like that, there's a certain amount of effort, muscular strength that you need, but there's also a certain amount of ease, when you're in the right spot and you're kind of resting on your bones and using your breath. So that balance of effort and ease is a concept we can bring into all aspects of our life. Where do we give effort appropriately? And for most people, where do we find a little bit more ease, a little bit more relaxation? So with that, I'll stop talking and I'll answer a couple questions. And I invite you all to really just enjoy the ease and what it feels like to let your stress hormones settle down as they are here while you're sitting in this beautiful garden. Thank you very much.
Thank you.